Should get Limbulo on there. Good day, ladies and gents, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 72, wherever you may be around the world today. As always, we shall start with a bit of a musical story. Okay, that was Garb of Old Gaul, my very own Napoleon. He's an actual young Highland gentleman, which is the theme tune for this channel at the moment, although he has promised me to do the Black Bear sooner rather than later, so we'll see when that happens. Just going to briefly say good day to my guests, and then I'll play us our normal patriotic intro tune. Adam, how you going, mate?
Yeah, good, you?
Yeah, not bad, mate. James, can you hear me? You're muted at the moment, James. No, you're not muted. Can you say something?
Yeah, I still can't hear you, sadly.
No, I can't hear you either, James. James, you have to make sure that you've allowed your microphone to play on the channel, which you may have to do like just before you join it, if you see what I mean. Ah, I heard something there. I can, but very, very faintly. Good on you, mate. While you're doing that, I'm going to carry on with our musical intro. Okay? Cool. Okay, that was, of course, the fife and drum version of the British Grenadiers, which, in my opinion, is the best version. So there we go. James, how's your sound going, mate?
Is it better? Can you hear me?
I
Oh, that's
can,
still
but
very quiet.
yeah, you're very low volume, but I can hear you.
Okay. It's probably about as good as it's gonna get until I find another solution.
All right, you need to be very close to your microphone and put it up to max volume, I suspect.
I have put it up to
Whoa,
max
that's
volume.
better.
That's
A
Is
better.
it
little.
better?
Yeah, it is better, actually.
Alrighty, there we go then.
Yeah, that's a bit better. Okay, Jobu wants to come on, so I'm going to send him the link. Adaman, you had a first subject, I do believe. And it
Did you want me
was,
to bring it up first, or?
yeah, it was the Victor Orban thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
All
So,
right. I've actually got the article, so I can probably put it on the screen, I guess.
I'll link it in the chat as well.
Yeah, stick it in there, mate. You can do that. Yeah, this is a Victor Orban article, and I'm just while I'm sending Jojo a link, check the Adaman's link in the chat. And it's I had a brief look at it. I don't know anything about it, but Adaman's looked at it, and it sounds quite interesting, actually.
Yeah. So
Carry on.
essentially, they have that American sort of right-wing conference CPAC. Well, nominally right-wing, but
Yep.
and they've Viktor Orban's hosted it in Hungary this year in Budapest. And there was obviously a bunch of different speeches in there. One of them was that he outlined at the beginning a sort of set of 12 rules for us to win back the West, as they're calling it. And I wasn't expecting much, but some of them are pretty interesting.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, so like, point one, he's got play by your own rules, which I was a bit, as soon as I read that, the sort of cynical side of me was like, oh, we're not actually falling into this sort of conservative trap again, are we? But no, he says that if you have to have some enemies. He kind of quotes Churchill, actually. He says, if you have enemies, it's a sure sign you're doing something right. He said it was important for conservatives to build thick skin and avoid being discouraged by claims that they're unfit for public life or being treated as troublemakers. Because if such slings and arrows are not being thrown, that's actually suspicious in of itself. But he also says that anyone who plays by the rules of their opponent will certainly lose. Which is true, ultimately.
Yeah, it is. It is. Jobu, you got a load of background noise, mate. You might want to mute yourself just for a minute. Thanks, man.
So point two, know your people and what they want. This is sort of a very sort of strong populist point. He says that we decided to stop immigration and build the wall on the southern border because Hungarian people said they did not want illegal immigration. They said Victor built the wall. That sounds like something Trump would say. 3 months later, the border barrier was up. The secret of the thing is not to overthink it. The Hungarian fence is a simple wire fence with motion sensors, watchtowers, and cameras. But if people want to protect their country, it's enough to serve that purpose. He also noted the idea that progressives want to impose their radical, unproven fantasies onto society represented a true threat, but also an opportunity for conservatives. And he says, quoting, because on the important issue, people really don't like leftist fever dreams. We need to find a few issues on which the left is completely out of touch with reality and present them, but in a way that is not only understood by pure intellectuals.
The one I really liked, Adam, is a foreign policy based on interest instead of ideology.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
I thought that was the one that stood out to me as the most sensible and the one that Britain in particular has long ago lost any notion of.
Yeah. So in that, he says, like, one of the quotes is, the progressives always say that foreign policy is a battle of ideologies, a battle of good and bad, where the course of history is decided. But as far as I can see, my dear friends, there have been at least 4 of these great battles in the last 100 years, and something is wrong with the formula. Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting point. And people have been saying it for centuries now that you can't have like this idea of a just war.
No.
It's
Look, any nation, any reasonably powerful nation, will fight a war if it suits them and it suits what they need. And any idea that that's not going to happen is ridiculous. In my opinion, it's ridiculous and childish. But also, don't fight wars that you don't need to fight. I mean, Britain invading Afghanistan or Iraq when they did probably, or almost certainly, was not worth doing. You could possibly argue that the original invasion of Afghanistan was worth it, but it should have been and then immediately finished once you got rid of the so-called Al Qaeda guys there.
Mm.
I have an interesting about wars you should not fight in Afghanistan. Starting in 2009.
Hang on, James, your audio is very intermittent there.
Yeah, it is.
When the war in Afghanistan shifted from being anti-training camp to being a nation-building thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, if you can still hear me, I'm going to continue. That's when things went wrong because we attempted to nation build with ideas that were already unpopular at home. Forcing, I guess, for lack of a better term, the postmodern thought of liberalism onto a third world people when it was already having challenges by a first world population.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm not sure how much people heard it, but I don't disagree with it. I don't know what to say to you, James. There is something wrong with your mic. I don't know what it is, but there is something wrong with it. You're very, very low volume most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's your volume's very intermittent. It's very up and down. It's all over the place.
I can hear you, but I'm not sure. Yeah, no, that's better, but I don't know how long it will stay that way.
Yeah, we'll find out how long it stays this way.
All right. Look, anyone who wants to stream, let me give you 2 pieces of advice. Buy a blue snowball or a snowball ice. They're quite cheap microphones. They'll cost you, I don't know what I paid for mine now, something like 60 Australian dollars. So that's pretty cheap. They plug straight into your laptop or your computer, but they have a reasonable quality. And that to me is what you need for streaming. All right.
I'm going to disagree with that, boys. I'm currently driving in my car on the way to work with the old iPhone headphones.
Yeah, I can hear you driving in your car.
Yeah, sorry about that, mate. I didn't mean to intrude. I just I saw you go live. I was getting a coffee on the way to work, and I just thought I'd pop on.
No, I wanted an Aussie on here tonight because I wanted someone to talk about the damned election.
And that's why I'm here, mate. That's why I'm here. I'm pretty chuffed at the moment, to be honest.
Why?
Why? Oh, because the Liberals were always going to lose, right? But for me, the real game was the real game was getting rid of some of these wets we had in these inner city seats. So almost everyone I wanted to see get voted out's gone. Dave Sharma's gone. Josh Frydenberg's gone. Tim Wilson's gone. Fiona Martin's gone. All the independent. So Adam, man, we've had this phenomenon where in the inner city electorates, you've had these wet liberals. Liberals equals conservatives in Australia for the audience. And they're the ones that have been leading the charge on the net zero backstab. They voted against the religious discrimination bill, which is protections against transgender ideology, and all these sorts of things. And they've all been voted out. So
well, that's good. That's good.
From a party politics point of view, that's a very good thing moving forward.
But am I not right, Jobu, in saying that Albanese is your typical really corrupt Australian trade union type bloke?
Look, he's a typical unionist. He's from the socialist left faction historically. I don't associate the word corrupt with him. We'll see if that stays true in time. But look, the pendulum swings, right. You're always going to have a period of Labor in government at some stage. And so the Liberals have been in power for 9 years, right? So the time may come, but the benefit we get out of this election is everyone we wanted to see get voted out got voted out. I'll give you with the example.
Some of them did. Yes, I grant you that.
Yeah, because it was important from my perspective that the people that led the COVID, led us through the COVID era, got voted out.
Yeah,
Josh Frydenberg. We use Josh Frydenberg as the example, right? So he was the assistant treasurer. Now, so he maintained the fiction with Morrison that the federal Liberals were against the lockdowns, right? But what Frydenberg did as treasurer is he bankrolled it through JobKeeper, and they gave the state parliaments access to the federal vaccine database, right? So if there was no JobKeeper program, Duke, there's no lockdown. There's no lockdown. Right, so he enabled the lockdowns, and what really got up my ass about him was every 2 or 3 weeks during the lockdowns down here in Melbourne, Josh Frydenberg would pop up and give this little deceitful little press conference. Andrew shouldn't be doing this. We oppose that. We urge this. We urge that. And then he'd do fucking nothing about it, right? So he was lying to the public to maintain the fiction that the federal Liberals were against the lockdown. So fuck him, and I'm glad he's gone.
Do you have any information yet on what's happening in the state elections, or are we going to have to wait for
that? When you say state, do you mean the Senate or?
Well, I want to see how badly dictator Dan and his wanks in Victoria do. Is what I'm talking about.
So it'll be a couple of days before we find out what the makeup of the Senate is in the federal parliament. And from what I saw, One Nation, who I voted for, and United Australia Party, they were polling about 5% apiece. So we should hopefully see a couple of senators from them. But the way the vote played out, Duke, was the primary vote of both major parties was down, including Labor's. Labor's is down to about 30%.
Yeah.
So and then they won on preferences because they get their preferences from the Greens and whatnot. But I'd imagine that Andrews would be looking at that primary vote in Victoria. I haven't seen the latest figures, but he'd be worried about that.
Hopefully.
One of the Sky News commentators made a good point, so he was referring to Palaszczuk up in Queensland, but this applies to Andrews in Victoria, in that Palaszczuk's business model was to blame the Liberals for everything, and she's not going to have that avenue available to her now because she would be blaming her own party, and that's true of Andrews as well. So this playing the us against them game, Victoria against the world and all that sort of thing, that doesn't apply anymore.
Hopefully.
So we'll see.
Yeah, no, a good point, Trevor. I'm not going to argue with any of them, mate. Sorry, I beg your pardon, because Trevor is driving, so I'm trying to work him in. Carry on with what you were saying about this stuff. Because I've got a bloke who wants to come on who doesn't like him, I think.
Well, I mean, that's understandable. I mean, there are definitely some criticisms to make of him, easily. There's a few things he actually says in his 12 points that I actually think he's actually not done very well on himself.
I think most of them were if he was honest and he did them, were very sensible.
Hello?
Yeah. All right.
Is that you, James?
Yeah, I'm trying to see if my mic works still.
Yeah, much better, mate. Be quiet for a bit just while Adam is talking. But yeah, that's much better. Carry on. Adam, carry on, mate.
Yeah, so we were talking before about the just war and that from this foreign policy thing, and he goes into this a little bit on the Ukraine thing. He says in a quote, "Russia is the aggressor, Ukraine the victim. We condemn the aggressor and help the aggressed, but at the same time we know that Hungary is not defended by Ukraine. That is nonsense. Hungary can only be defended by NATO and the Hungarian defense forces. Population-wise, we have taken in a large number of refugees, and the Hungarian people are happy to help, but they do not want to pay the price of war because it is not their war, and they do not benefit from it. They know very well that with war comes sanctions, inflation, stagnation, and economy, and war always impoverishes people." Well, I mean, we're seeing that in a very real terms here right now.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree at all, mate. Carry on.
And yeah, and it's kind of, you see this issue with there's this thing that the some of the Wignats, they'll say like about the eternal Anglo meme, and they will talk about, one of the things that will often come up is they will take the piss out of this old British saying, which is that Britain doesn't have the empire doesn't have like friends, it has interests.
Yeah,
but that is just a realistic way to look at these things.
Totally agree, mate. No argument from me at all on that.
So yeah, he says another point: conservatives need a powerful media voice more than ever. Which is, yeah, he says that conservatives basically need to wake up to the idea that of how much power the media holds. He says that the Democrat Party has, in America, has many media sources serving it. Yeah, he says another point he says is expose your opponent in advance. Orban said that the fifth point conservatives can pursue victory is to expose their opponent's intentions. And he says in a quote, having media is necessary, but not a sufficient condition for winning. You also have to be a taboo breaker. Perhaps I don't need to introduce this to our American friends, because who would be a bigger taboo breaker than President Donald Trump himself? But you can take it to the next level. It's not the taboos of today that need to be broken, but the taboos of tomorrow. Here in Hungary, we do this by revealing what the left is up to before they do it. At first, they will deny it, but then it will be even more successful when it turns out that we were right all along. And he also talks about this thing with the LGBT ideology in classrooms that they basically supposedly squashed after having a referendum on.
Yeah, fair enough. Hang on, I'm just gonna have to answer simple fire here.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that the eternal Anglo isn't a thing, but
I am.
I do have a question. I've actually never quite understood what exactly the eternal Anglo is. I've seen the memes before, but I don't know exactly what its definition would be.
Well, essentially, it's that it's the idea that Britain has basically, or the Anglo has squashed.
Always bad.
Yeah, squashed any chances of sort of Europe strengthening and improving, and sometimes just saving itself. So, like,
basically, because Britain is like an offshore island, that instead of having a view that looks into Europe, has always been a offshore island that looks across the world. And the pro-German cucks don't like that at all. That's my own view. I mean,
yeah, that's true, but also that's an inherently, the eternal Anglo sounds like an inherently continental European thing. They view Britain as,
if you're a continental European, it probably does, because Britain only gets involved in Europe when Britain is stupid, really. The more involved in Europe we get, the more stupid we are. Like the First World War, for example.
Exactly. Although I think World War I. Again, I don't think Britain's involvement in World War I was a mistake in and of itself.
I do.
But I think Britain made very poor decisions in the war, mainly because
the whole British involvement in World War I was a mistake. But I mean, that's my own opinion, and you may be right.
Yeah. Again, as things played out, it was a mistake. Though I don't think it was because of the involvement. I think it was because how World War I was orchestrated why it was orchestrated.
But before we go on with this, James, let me introduce Dave Berger on, who doesn't like, I think, some of the stuff that Adam was just talking about from the Hungarian dude.
All right, go for it, man.
Yeah, hi. It's me. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you fine, mate. No
yep, okay. We can hear you.
So, there are a few things with Orban's policies, mostly that I don't like. One thing is he really loves
where do you come? Where do you come from first before we go anywhere, Dave?
Oh, okay. I'm from Hungary.
Okay, fair enough.
So I actually live here. That's why I thought I can.
Cool. That's why I asked.
So he loves minimum wage. I have no idea why. Minimum wage is a horrible thing, a horrible idea. The first time they introduced it, it was the Fidesz party back in around 2000 or 98. I don't remember exactly. But they are raising it every time there is an election because it's like a good thing. It's a horrible thing. The other thing, he subsidizes everything. So, for example, the gas, electricity, everything is the lowest in Hungary, in Europe. So basically, I'm paying like 10 penny for a kilowatt of electricity, about 30 penny for a cubic meter of gas. And that's way too cheap.
Over there.
And we all know it's more expensive than this. So it means it's subsidized. So we are paying through our taxes, basically.
Yeah.
So it's a lie. But the problem with this lie is, for one thing, is we pay more taxes. So it's, if you think it's cheap, you spend more. So basically, it costs more. That's one thing. The other thing, like public transport. The public transport haven't got any more expensive in the last 10 years. It's the same price. Still one of the cheapest in Europe. It's like, I don't know, like in Budapest, the public transport monthly ticket cost about 25 quid. And this is the same for the last 10 years. And we know it's more expensive than that. So it's the same thing. And these are the policies that I really don't like. We have a 27% VAT, which is the highest in the world.
You also have less VAT exemptions over there as well, don't you? You also have less products that are VAT exempt over there, don't you? Like you have to pay VAT on a lot more products than
most products.
Yeah.
Or actually everything. It just depends on, I think, on food and physical books, but just physical books, you have 5%.
Right.
That's
everything else is 27.
5%
you also have
5% on actual books is pretty good.
On actual books. Now you can digital books is 27 because it's
but I mean
it's a service.
But half of digital books one can download like free basically anyway. So
I know, but if you want to buy,
but 5% on real books is pretty cool, I'd say.
Yeah, but
20% on everything else is a lot.
27% on everything else. So basically, if you want to buy like a mobile phone, it's the most expensive in the world to buy it in Hungary.
Well, I don't know. I don't own a phone, and well, actually, I do, but it hasn't got a chip in it. And
it's not a
had a chip in it for years, and I actually think it's the best thing I ever did.
Yeah, but I mean, I absolutely rage about our 20% VAT. And there's actually quite a few things in the UK that are at least VAT free.
Yeah,
so 27%
I like his
is absolutely wild.
I have no problem with it, but the way he basically would say it's a lie, to subsidize things. And we are not told it's subsidized. I mean, people know who know how much things cost, but it's not told that we are subsidizing this or that.
All right, so let me ask you a question, Dave.
Okay.
Dave Bergeron. Do you think that he is basically pro-Hungarian or not?
Oh, he's pro-Hungarian, but he's mostly pro-Orban. So
yeah, I mean,
he's a politician. He was a politician all his life. So
would you say like he's more pro-Hungarian than Macron?
Or, definitely.
Or would you say he is more pro-Hungarian than Alexander Johnson is pro-British, for example?
Yeah, I think he isn't in like the the VEF or any of these big organizations that are pushing for global power. So that's a positive.
Yeah, I mean, he actually makes.
That's kind of what I thought.
I mean, one of the things he says in the article is achieve economic success or fail. But to be honest, because this is when I said earlier that the point where I think he kind of contradicts himself is he hasn't really brought in sort of a great level of economic success. I don't think. I'm also a little skeptical of these birth rate improvement arguments that he's claiming.
Aren't there like subsidies for women in Hungary who have more children?
Yeah, I believe so.
Dave Bergeron, I believe there are like subsidies
for women, who give
for
birth. Absolutely.
Hungarian women who have more children.
Yes,
absolutely. Do you think they've worked at all?
In a way, I think the direct subsidies for women who give birth, like paying less taxes or going on the public transport cheaper, things like that. That's fine. What I don't like, and he has that one too, is the policy is called CHOK. It basically means you get a mortgage for a new house or a newly built house if you have X number of children, and the amount depends on how many children you have, and you have to pay it back. But I think it doesn't have an increased amount of it, but I'm not sure about that one. But basically, you can claim it.
So let me ask you, if like you're a Hungarian couple with 2 children, compared to a Hungarian couple with say 5 children, how much cheaper will your mortgage be?
Compared to the two, not much cheaper. I don't know the exact numbers. I know there is a step between 1, 2, and 3. I don't know if there are steps above that.
Okay. So basically, the more kids you have, the cheaper your mortgage. Is that right?
Yeah, basically that, and the amount is higher too. But you still can't buy a house from it,
Yeah, no, I get that, but I can't help feeling that is a way more advanced.
You would think
better system for like indigenous people in their country than anything there is in Britain or America, for example.
Yeah, but there is a problem, with mortgages.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're saying is because of this program, the demand for housing is artificially stimulated, causing the price to go up. So if you aren't married or you have no kids, then you're priced out of the housing market. Is that correct?
And with at least the amount of this mortgage, So the housing prices went up about Western levels now, So if I want to buy a house, it costs around 250,000 in Budapest now.
Yeah, I definitely saw that because I was looking I was actually looking at house prices in Hungary a little while ago.
100,000, not long ago. So that's a huge problem.
I get all of that, but if you are, what is this is the most important point. I think, Dave Berger, what is the amount of net immigration into Hungary every year?
Well, I looked it up.
If you know,
it's somewhere around 40,000.
Oh,
wow!
Right, so basically, it's a bit higher than that. I mean, if
it's almost none. Basically.
Yeah, but many people leave at least for some time,
Yeah. That's why I said.
So that's why it's a bit higher.
Yeah.
On the net, around 40,000-50,000.
That's why I say what is the net immigration, which is
it's around 40,000.
Allowing for those coming in and also those going out. See, like most of the people on my channel, I'm not saying every one of us because that's probably not true, but almost all of us, and certainly me and Alan, I think I would be right in saying we're for zero net immigration into UK these days. So,
Yeah,
so what is Hungary's net immigration as far as you know these days?
Yeah, as I said, it's around 40,000-50,000 a year.
So nothing, basically.
Yeah, but the thing
Not
is,
much.
like having really low net immigration is obviously great. But I mean, I've always been a big proponent that you need to win part of this on the housing market issue. And if that means still pricing native people out of the housing market, it's not really much of a populist position that you can take.
Yeah,
but is it true though, Armand? Because, like, you know, if there's only 40,000 people coming in a year, and most of the people who are like actually pricing other people out of the housing market are people with 3 or 4 kids, like in England or Britain, we would probably say, God, if only we had that problem, wouldn't we?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, currently I can't buy my way onto the housing market anyway. So if I had to choose between,
and you don't have you do not have a shit job.
No.
You're not a minimum wage worker.
No, not at all.
Nowhere near. I know you're not.
Speaking specifically to like entering the housing market, like, you know, I will probably not be able to afford a house for at least a good chunk of my early life, which is why, and I'm going to school for agriculture. So I'm seriously considering.
I said,
sorry, what'd you say?
I said cool.
Yeah, but I'm seriously considering moving to South Africa when I finish with my studies because.
Go to Australia, man. Go to Australia. Don't go to South Africa.
I haven't looked at much at Australia, but if their prices are lower than where I am, then I'll definitely consider it. But prices are, you know, I'm seriously considering emigrating once I'm done with schooling because prices are lower overseas and it allows you to start off better in life.
Mate, I lived in South Africa in 1985 to 2000, and great country back in the day. But these days, if I was going to do agriculture as my main deal, I'd go to Australia for sure.
I'll give it a look. Thanks for the advice.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at possibly getting a remote job now, so maybe I'll join friend of the show Richard and move down to Spain or somewhere nice. but yeah, 555 said I own a house and I'm a minimum wage earner. It does definitely depend on where in England you are. You can go to some places and get on the housing ladder, but you know, in my hometown, a 1-bedroom shithole of a flat with no outdoor space, no balcony, in a rough end of town is more than an apartment with a shared communal garden and a pier on Lake Como.
Yeah.
So, you know, for sort of reference.
But I happen to know that Adamant is in the south of England, which is like
southeast, which is
really the worst place to be. I tell you what, Adamant, if I was you, mate, I'd seriously look at Devon and Cornwall.
The thing is, I mean, the actual area that I live in is lovely. You know, I'm
not
far from the North Downs.
Yeah, I know. It is a lovely part of the world, but it's getting so overcrowded.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's kind of this weird thing where there's still a lot of countryside around here, and they're just throwing houses up all over it. And as soon as the housing estates are built, they've already increased in price from what a similar house would have been, you know, a year earlier anyway. So
I don't know, mate. I lived in Berkshire for a while. I had a 1904 cottage in a tiny little village that was like kind of between Henley-on-Thames and Marlow. And my local pub used to be a war hunting lodge. And it was beautiful. It was such a lovely place to live. But everyone now tells me that even half of those places that I used to know are becoming shit.
Yeah.
You know, like even Marlow isn't what Marlow used to be, which was like a pretty posh English town. I don't know. If I was in England now and I wanted to stay in England, I would absolutely be looking at the far west of Devon or Cornwall, or otherwise be looking at the north of England, to be honest, for the most part. I just don't think the southeast thing is going to survive. I just don't see how it can.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, one of my friends, his girlfriend is trying to get on the housing market now, and she's got a good budget to work with, and even then, she's saying that houses are selling for sort of 50 to 80 grand above the asking price.
Ridiculous.
You know, people are, so even when you look at the actual house adverts at the literal house prices, that's not an accurate representation of what the actual values are.
Yeah, no, it's just crazy. I don't know. Look, I moved to the outskirts of Melbourne, but I didn't move far enough. I moved as far as I could afford, basically, whereby I could still get to shops and stuff. I now wish, and this was 2 years ago almost, I now wish I'd moved at least another 50 k's out. And I can't afford. I just can't afford it. So I don't know. I don't know, man. I think we're falling. We're falling, and we're falling really quick.
I mean, taking it back to the Orban thing, I think the thing with that is that it's kind of. I mean, we've had this argument about Putin before. You know, people can say, oh, you know, there's a lot of issues with him. He's pretty. You know, they've got these weak points. They can be pretty liberal, blah blah blah. But ultimately, us over here, we'd still vote for him in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah, I mean, like Orban or Putin compared to Alexander Johnson or the current Australian leader, I would immediately vote for without even thinking about it.
Yeah, and by the same token, you know, we have prominent figures within the dissident right, you know, who were saying go out and vote for Boris.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well,
just because even he was better than the opposite.
Well, look, I mean, I don't know if I would describe AA as a prominent figure in the dissident right. But
his name gets around a lot. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, it does. But I have to say, like, he voted for the Dark Lord, who he constantly now slags
I think he did it twice.
Yeah, or at least once. I know he did. But like, I never voted for that scum. Never would. He was in favor. He was anti-Brexit because he was worried about his health prices. Again, I was always totally pro-Brexit. He's a bit of a hypocrite in many respects. Let's say.
Voted for the Lib Dems.
Yeah, well, but I mean, also, you know, he thinks there is an anime to trans pipeline.
Well, I think that's probably true, to be fair.
Well, maybe there is, but I don't understand if you think that, how you have two mentally ill men pretending to be women as regular guests on your stream.
Wait, yes,
how do you do that? Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, he has that Scottish thing. I don't know what that's called. But he also has the English thing, Rose of something or other. Both of whom are mentally ill men.
I don't think he's had them on in a long time, but
the latter one, no, not so much.
Yeah.
And of course, he has no problem with assorted gay guys who spend most of their time telling everyone on the stream how bad women are. Well, all right, women do have their faults, for sure.
But I thought that would be the one endearing feature about him to you.
Not really, no, because women certainly have their faults, but like, you know, the people who really hate women are gays. But, you know, it's like... I'm just not sure how that works, you know.
Well, I mean, people change, but still.
Does he?
Well, it doesn't explain the new stuff, admittedly, but about his voting record at least. But I mean, yeah, I mean, talking about him worried about his house prices. I mean, So I think the doxastic Draco said a little bit above is Viktor Orban inflating or stimulating house prices to protect his sort of boomer vote.
I have no idea, but I mean, compared to who we have in the West, he's pretty good as far as I can see.
Yeah, just for clarification, I want to talk about the opposition just a minute. So the Hungarian opposition is basically many small parties together.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's like the Labour Party with the Green Party mixed together. That's basically the opposition, and their views is like that too. So, for example, you mentioned that vote against school grooming.
Yeah.
But the opposition ran a campaign against that vote, and the way they did it is by saying it was nonsense, because most people, even on the right, they don't know how bad the situation is outside Hungary in the schools.
Yeah, true.
So they said, it's nonsense. It's not worth voting for. When you vote for it, just go in and put an X on the yes, put an X on the no, so it's not gonna count. And that's what happened actually. So even though,
so is that why the vote was went so well in his favor?
It went in his favor, but the numbers weren't enough.
Right.
So even though it got voted, it doesn't count.
Yeah, but
there's not enough people voted for it.
But all I'm saying, Dave Bergeron, is that like compared to the so-called, in inverted commas, leaders in the West, like
he's all right.
Yeah, he's okay. He really is.
He could still be better though.
The vast majority of people in Britain would swap him for Alexander Johnson in a nanosecond.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, he has some bad policies, and one of the bigger problems is basically if you get too big, they're gonna swallow you. I mean, the party, they're gonna buy you out, as like the country just bought out the airport in Budapest. They sold it like I don't know how many years ago to a private company outside of the country, and now they thought before the elections that we want to buy it, but we don't want to sell it. That's okay, we want to buy it, and that was it. So these things happen, and that's not that's another thing that's not all right.
Yeah, I heard about this before. I remember that guy, the German guy Kraut, who is pretty insufferable, but
he is, for God's sake.
Yeah, but he did point out that like there was a few instances where, and we get this in the UK too, but there was a few instances where Viktor Orban's party was essentially giving contracts to sort of their friends to build sort of things like train stations and stuff like that in places where
the British government never does that.
Yeah. No, as I said, he's a typical politician, basically.
Yeah, Yeah.
So it's not that big of a deal compared to the West. But
No, I listen. I'm not going to argue that.
We were sold in a dream that after the communism.
I don't think Orban is anywhere near perfect, but compared to Alexander Johnson, I'd swap him in a nanosecond.
Yeah, as Marvin said, low bar.
That's exactly right. Right.
That's the other problem. We don't have this 8-year mandatory switch to a prime minister. So that's I think it's an optics problem mostly. It's like voting for the same guy. You see his mistakes over the now around 20 years. It's a bit iffy.
Yeah.
You still vote for it because the position is so bad, but that's about it.
Seems reasonable. Guys, can I just say that Raul Nimbu is supposed to join us? And if anyone is in touch with Raul Nimbu, maybe they could give him a nudge that he's supposed to join us. But apart from that, James, you haven't said much for a while. How's your audio?
Yeah, it's fine. Sorry. one of not roommates, but one of my hallmates came in because he needed help moving something, so I went AFK for
No worries, man. No worries.
I actually had some interesting point to bring up. Is we talk about you shouldn't vote for X right-wing party because X, Y, or Z, or like for example the British Conservatives. Like so in a situation where you exist in a sort of two-party system, be it England, Canada, Australia, the U.S., and the right-wing party of the nation is unsatisfactory, what do you exactly do to combat that? Because if you don't support them, then you acquiesce victory to someone who will move things in the wrong direction even faster.
I think we actually need a third party in all those countries.
That would be interesting, but
I mean, I don't mean a third position by. I mean a third by.
Yeah, literally a third party that you can vote for. I understand.
We do that. It's the Lib Dems.
Adam, and you know damn well that is not what I mean. But I mean a real conservative.
The thing is, we've had. I think the UKIP at one point was actually beating the Lib Dems.
Yes, they were. Yes, they
and
were.
Yet they still weren't occupying the third position in the House of Parliament. So, that's just the way the
but that was also about the same time that we got the Brexit vote. The so-called elites were absolutely certain they were going to win.
You mean the position that the establishment absorbed, the Conservatives absorbed to save themselves?
Look, we did not get a real Brexit, absolutely not. But the Brexit vote, the real people in charge thought, we'll do this referendum, and the plebs will all vote the way we tell them to, and they didn't.
Yeah. I mean,
what I don't think they counted on was what's his face, Cameron, I think, had been using the EU as a scapegoat for every bad thing that happened, and so he didn't expect the British people.
I don't think it was even that. The vast majority.
Yeah, but I don't think he expected the British people to actually believe him blaming the EU for everything and vote to leave.
No, he probably didn't. But the vast majority of the Brexit vote was an anti-mass immigration vote because it was the only way they could do it that was acceptable.
Yeah. I mean, you still get cope over that now. People will. You talk about immigration and someone will dive in and say, "Oh, so the Brexit vote was over immigration." And
yes, it was. Yes, it was. Yes. Every time someone tells you that, say, "Yes, it was." That's what it was about.
Yeah.
Because it was the truth. And it was the acceptable way for the British people to turn around and say, "We have had enough of mass immigration."
Yeah.
But sadly, of course, because the so-called, in inverted commas, elites didn't expect the British to vote that way, it's been totally destroyed by our government. Just has.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's a toughie. I mean, I think the third party thing is quite a difficult thing because we have, we need one force to dominate. I know this is something we've talked about a lot before. We need one force to dominate the others, essentially, within the right wing political sphere, and then whatever that
only way that's going to happen. The only way that's going to happen is with a third party. It's never going to happen with the Conservatives. I know you and many others have talked about infiltrating the Conservatives, and it's almost bloody impossible now because of how socialist they really are.
Well, actually, that's not true. It depends on what you're going in there to do, but I mean, if you want to go in there and
stop mass immigration,
essentially troll them from the inside, you can do a lot of damage, and it's quite easy.
Do you think you could stop mass immigration?
I know someone who, within about 4 months of joining the Conservative Party, was standing on a stage next to Johnson.
Yep.
It's not, they're so desperate for young, a young talent to come in and sort of be able to speak and invigorate in any sort of way, you can get in there and add a bit of spice. You know, you will get kicked out, but even that act of going in there causes a bit of trouble and getting thrown out will actually cause rifts within the Tory party that can work to your advantage later on.
But you don't think like you could go in there and actually become an MP and then stick around?
Well, it depends on how you play the game.
If you're totally anti-immigration.
I would not be surprised if there are certainly backbencher MPs who are very anti-mass immigration, but you will never be a cabinet minister or the prime minister. You'll always just be a backbencher.
No. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you got the common sense group. I mean, you could lie all your way to the top. Not that I endorse that, but I mean that would be
the only way we'll get there at the moment, Alan.
I mean, at a lower level. Oh, hello everyone, by the way.
Right.
At a lower level, you can.
Yeah, Rupert August, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. You can establish a group or some kind of organization or like binding body in some way that is adjacent to the Conservative Party, but not necessarily entirely beholden or subsidiary to it. So I'm thinking in particular of something like the Monday Club. So you can apply pressure in a cohesive, organized way, that can actually put faces and names and boots on the ground towards pressuring the Conservatives from the right and trying to pull them rightwards. And that's probably one of the better ways to go about it if you're not going to look at it. Look at things from trying to pressure people in particular from behind the scenes, because that would be the other way of going about it potentially. Just in the form of conversations over bars and trying to nudge people that way.
I mean, this was essentially what I did when I was in there, but I was very young and hopelessly naive, and I didn't do it anywhere near as good as what I could have done. And I definitely think, looking at it now, I think that's actually a big Achilles heel of the Tory party. That I mean, there was a point a while ago, maybe 4 years ago, where there was actually like senior Tory ministers saying that there was all these young far right people joining the party, and it was terrifying them. And of course, that never came to pass, largely because those people were never organised in any way. But you can, if you work locally on your own level with a couple of based buddies, a couple of good friends, you could get in there and do some very real and deliver some very real blows.
But you can't get to the higher reaches is the problem there.
Oh, so we'll just throw the whole plan out the window. Ooh, give up, throw it up in the air, flip the
table. Adamant, I'm not one for doing that. You know that I'm not. But like the fact is that you can cause some problems at lower levels of the Conservative Party, but to actually change things at higher level is almost impossible.
Sure, but that's why we need a multifaceted approach.
Yeah, we also need a third party that is a British nationalist party, not in any way, shape, or form Nazi larpers, but a pro-British, what would be good for Britain party. That's always been my view, and if we could do that,
well, that's Farage's party.
Well, yeah, you'd think it, wouldn't you?
Wouldn't I?
Well, I mean, I would think it, but I'm not sure if it is what I'm trying to say.
I'm pretty Farage-pilled, so.
Yeah, no, I don't hate him. I mean, listen, I'd take Nigel Farage over Alexander Johnson any day. Absolutely. But is he up for that? I'm not sure he is, but we'll see.
I would be interested to see how you would create a party like that. I think that if you say start it from the ground up and contest an election out of the gate, you run the risk of handing Labour a victory. But if, say, for example, you can have MPs leave a party and found their own, and you already start with essentially safe seats, then you can begin to contest elections well. And You're no longer just some guys and their friends. You are an actual party.
Yeah. It is.
Well, the Cucks tried that, didn't they?
Yeah.
That didn't go very well. The CUK.
I just feel that what Nigel Farage will not do, never has done, is turn around and say, look, Britain needs a net zero immigration policy. And he won't do that.
Well,
the reason we got the Brexit referendum is because UKIP were taking large numbers of Conservative votes. But and so Farage knows what this is about. He just won't use it.
Well, he does, because I mean, like,
yeah, he does, because sometimes he will let it out a little bit.
Well, it's not a little bit. I mean, we had, I mean, it used to be the case that for, you know, a good solid sort of 50 years, like 75 to 80% of the country was against immigration.
Always.
Yeah,
Always,
even more than 80% if you go back far enough.
Yep.
And well, after the Brexit vote happened, essentially the powers that be tried to sort of absorb. Obviously, the immigration question got absorbed into Brexit, and then they just tried to obviously sort of cabinet that, you know, shut it away. And he sort of very much pushed that back on again. It's back being the number one issue.
You remember those big posters of like thousands upon thousands of immigrants?
Well, that was back in the day, but I'm talking about even more recent stuff. He was pushing this stuff hard, just constantly pushing on the boats. And people would say, oh, well, you know, he needs to talk about legal immigration. Well, it doesn't matter. If you're memeing immigration into the mainstream, it's immigration in the mainstream. You're not going to get that much nuance into it anyway, to divide whether it's illegal or legal or whatever.
Yeah, it's all bullshit anyway. Yeah, absolutely.
And he's kind of successfully pushed on that quite hard, to the point where it is the number one, or it was at least till quite recently the number one issue amongst Conservative voters. I mean, that's part of the reason why we'll get a Rwanda deal. As much as a Rwanda deal is laugh it up. But the thing is, you never would have got that. You never would have got even that. They would have just kept laughing in your face. And as at least the thing is, the Rwanda deal. What the Rwanda deal represents is fear from the Conservative Party, that they know. I mean, the very fact that they call this stuff like Operation Red Meat is a sign that they know that they have to throw something to the voters.
Look, Adam, and I know you're an intelligent bloke, and you know for a fact, right, that the Rwanda deal is a con, basically.
Yes.
You also, I presume, though, the people who are providing most of the money for people who are held in detention as illegal immigrants in UK are people like Roundtrees and Cabri. They're providing most of the money for that shit. Right.
You're missing the point that the Rwanda deal really doesn't have much to do with Rwanda. Like the importance of the Rwanda deal.
It has fuck all to do with that.
Yeah, the Rwanda deal's importance is the fact that politicians have to talk about this stuff, whether they like it or not.
Yeah, it's to pretend that, like, oh, we're going to send these guys to Africa.
And the Rwanda deal is them saying, here, look, you've had your thing, piss off now, get back under your rock.
Yeah,
and it's not going to work, but that's why they're doing it, because they think it will.
Yeah, like look, you know as well as I do, Adam, my deal has for a long time been set up like a camp on Ascension Island in the South Atlantic with barbed wire and a children's playground and like some nurses and shit. And that's where they should all go. And if we did that, they wouldn't come anymore.
No.
They would just stop coming because they would think, we're better off in France.
Yeah, but they also just need to stop handing out visas.
My opinion on the immigration thing is, there comes a point where the ones that are here and are UK citizens, you're kind of stuck with. But you don't. But you can say stop renewing visas and stop giving new ones and enforce the law. But interestingly, when people bring up the immigration debate, they tend not to ever address what do you do with the ones that are here. And my personal opinion is,
I know what I would do with them, but that would be not really.
That wouldn't be very kosher, now would it?
No, it wouldn't be kosher. It wouldn't be kosher. I'd send them all home. But there you go.
I'm of the personal opinion that there are some groups, especially say, like the Indian populations that fled Kenya and Uganda. You can't really send them home because they're really just British at this point. And my solution is
no. They're Indians. They can go to India or Uganda. There's their two choices. That's what I would give them. I would say, want to go home to India? Want to go home to Uganda? That's all I would offer them.
Well, I'll disagree with you on that. I'm personally of the opinion that...
Why?
Well, again, they don't speak Ugandan language. They don't speak an Indian language. Most, especially Indians who live in Africa, only speak English.
If they came from Uganda or India, they're the two places they should have the choice to go back to.
I think it would be a mistake. I say, for example, especially first generations, yeah, you can ditch them. But, especially if they came from Uganda, they've lived I would be surprised if their grandparents were born.
No, man, I would do that with third generation without a single thought.
How long until we send so I assume the Irish are going to go back to Ireland too?
Yes.
I wouldn't do that.
What would you do with the mixed couples?
No, I wouldn't do that, actually, because there's loads of good Irish people. I just wouldn't do that. There are many good Irish people.
What would you do with the mixed couples, though, Duke?
What, of Irish people?
No.
any mixed couples.
Oh, I'd let them decide for themselves. The English or British bit could stay in Britain, and the non-British bit could leave or not leave.
But wouldn't you just then have lots of, let's say, non-white foreigners or people of foreign descent sort of worming their way into relationships with sort of older British people by incentivizing that behaviour?
But I just said I would let them decide for themselves. So, like, if you had a mixed Indian-British couple, and it was a British bloke and an Indian girl, I'd turn around and say, well, look, man, you can either piss off to India or you can stay here, but your girl can't. And if it was a British guy and an Indian girl, I would do the same thing. I would turn around and say, look, you can stay here or piss off to India.
No, I mean, what about the children? Would you send A back to Iraq with Aryan?
Well, like mixed race children, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
for choice, I would send them away too. Yes.
Ooh.
Okay.
For choice, I would absolutely send them away.
I don't know. I would do the football test. Just make the home team play against their origin country team and see what's the reaction.
No, I wouldn't do that at all. Because a half Indian person is not British.
Nah, if they go for the home team.
I don't care how well they play.
No, he's more talking about sit them in front of a TV playing a game, and if they root for the home country, off they go. If they root for England, they get a chance to stay.
I wouldn't do either of those things. I'd, by and large, want them gone.
They would be sent home too.
No, people mistake me sometimes because, I'm not a big guy who believes in the JQ or any of that shit, because I don't. But I don't want any of these people in my country. I just don't.
But what was because I always just want to return to the pre 1948 or 47 Nationalities Act.
Yep.
But that before then, it was done based on the heritage of the parents. Did it have to be both parents, or was it just one back then? Do we know?
It was mostly the dad, but the mother came into it.
Right. So under that, like most mixed race kids would be allowed to have the choice to stay.
Well, I don't
if
think
one of their parents was ancestrally British.
But you know what? There are like 14 British overseas territories around the world, and with some of these mixed race people, I would say, look, go and live there. That's what I would do. I would say, look, there are 14 British places around the world, and they're British overseas territories. Go live there. I really would. That's what I'd do.
It's not a very good thing to do to your colonies, though, is it?
Why?
Well, because you're just throwing all the people you don't want over there.
But most of them won't go there, Armin. Most of them will go home. Most of them will go back to Pakistan or India or wherever they came from. Most of them will go home. Only a small minority will be like mixed race people or something like that who will need to go somewhere.
Interesting. I have a question. So there's often a phenomenon of people who do guest work in a nation like, say, the U.S. or Britain, and they live and work there their entire adult life, and then when they retire, they leave. They take the British pounds, they go back to Pakistan, they live like a king. Yeah. I see that as something. If you re-enter that idea into, especially, say, the Pakistani population of Britain, I wouldn't be surprised if many of them decide, hey, I've got some British savings. I'm going to go home to a country more amenable to my culture and my values and live like a king because I have British pounds in my pocket.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you choose to ignore the many, many thousands of Pakistanis who are involved in child rape gangs that attack English schoolgirls, you might even be right. But I mean, you have to ignore all those people first.
Yep.
Well, I mean, that's a different category though, because now you're talking about people that are, criminals. But
most Pakistanis are the most law-abiding people in the entire universe. Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the sarcasm's good and all, but I mean, that's a different category entirely. I mean, obviously, one of the first things you'd do would be take away visas and deport people that have actually broken the law.
Oh, yeah,
and you'd actually be looking back and making sure that people that were part of that were properly punished anyway.
Every single one of them would be deported. I'd say to all of them, like 50 years in the UK jail will go home. And I guarantee you that virtually all of them would say, I'm going to go home.
Well, they do now. I mean, we've currently, for anyone that ever gets the arse when you bring it up, we currently have repatriation programs set up by the government, but they're so underfunded and so tiny. But people do use them, but they usually use it when they're given their one last final chance that they'll either get deported or they can go home. And at that point, they usually do take it and go home. But the fact that they get given multiple chances, of course, is ridiculous to begin with. But
yeah,
again, I'm of the opinion that no matter how, like, if you are here on a visa and you're convicted of any kind of crime, whatever it is, we're taking your visa away. It's a privilege to be in this country, and you've decided to violate the trust of your host, and you got to go.
Send them home. Yep.
And the biggest issue is I don't even think there needs to be drastic change. If you enforce the existing rules to the letter, I think a lot of problems would be solved.
Yeah, but you know as well as I do, no one does.
Yeah.
No one does that at all. I mean, my God.
I would go with the HEPA method, the Hans Hermann Hoppe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he says
anyone
can come in if someone is responsible for it all the time. If they commit a crime, you go to prison, they're going away. Things like that. So that would be an okay system, because a total,
Yeah.
ban on coming
enough.
into the country, that would be foolish. But
No, I
Switzerland has
don't think a
something
total
that's-
ban would be foolish, but I get the rest of it.
I mean, Switzerland has a system that's at least halfway towards this now, where you know, if you want to bring in a policy or idea in that area, you can only do it really within that area, largely.
yes,
You know, if you want
they
to
have
bring
this
in,
canton
Yeah.
system.
Yeah.
yeah,
The Confederation system is a great system because it allows most of Switzerland to be a relatively sane and nice place, and all the lunacy of Geneva and Bern and Zurich be confined to Geneva, Bern, and Zurich. You know,
Isn't it also true that, like, to get into Switzerland as a citizen, you pretty much have to have at least 2 Swiss people who are going to turn around and say, yeah, you would make a good Swiss citizen.
to become a citizen,
Yeah,
but you need, but you also just need an absurd amount of money. You have to own like $1 million worth of like
On
Swiss property.
Yeah, but also you have to have Swiss people turning around saying, yeah, I think this dude's okay. Which again strikes me as totally sane and sensible.
Absolutely.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, Larry in chat says the issue with the UK is we hand out citizenship far too. I've got something pop up. Far too easily. Just fixed visas will not fix the issue. Yeah, I mean that's true as well. Like one of the things when I was younger, I remember is constantly hearing people tell me about how hard the citizenship test was and how I probably wouldn't be able to pass it. And then I took a mock one, and it was laughable. It was ridiculously simple. You barely call it a test.
Like what are the questions? Like what's an example of the question?
But there was literally a question in there about how it's British to like tea. There was a question about, I think, the Black Death. There was a question about one of the monarchs. It was like 18 questions. It was very short.
So in other words, if you read the Wikipedia article on the
primary school English.
Yeah. If you just gloss through the Wikipedia article, you'd probably get them all pretty easy.
Also, I realized recently that unlike some other countries, we don't require people to renounce other citizenships when they become a citizen of Britain.
Yeah.
Which, we can say that that's a bit, I don't know, cucked or something, but it does have the slight benefit of much more easily being able to deport people because you won't leave someone citizenless if you take away their citizenship, their British citizenship anyway.
Yeah. We, I mean, it's funny as well because in a lot of these other citizenships, like you might have someone that holds a citizenship with both the US and the UK, and yet the US citizenship has something under the clause that like you renounce all fealty to other sovereigns or something along those lines.
Unless
when you turn 18,
unless you were born there.
Sorry, when you turn 18, you have to like pick what country you want to be a citizen of. Though often they don't force you to do anything, and they just say, "Well, you don't have to renounce your loyalty to the Queen if you're a Canadian citizen. We just don't recognize you as a Canadian citizen."
Yeah, right. but also in America, like if you're born in America, supposedly you suddenly become an American, even if your mother and father were both from, I don't know, Sri Lanka or something.
Yes. Yeah. Rule of the land.
Misinterpretation of the Constitution, actually.
And another thing that is ridiculous is that recently we were watching countries like, I think it was Barbados. I'm not sure. I think it was Barbados. Who were saying that they want reparations for slavery and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, all the time, there is a British warship, a guard ship in the Caribbean. And every single time there's like a hurricane or whatever they call them in the Caribbean, and there are probably like 7 or 8 British areas there, but there are a lot more supposedly Commonwealth areas. And all of those get the benefit of that British guardship. So helicopters bringing in aid and food and taking out wounded people and all the rest of it. But now we have Barbados, I think it was Barbados, turning around and saying, oh no, Britain must now do reparations to the Caribbean. Get fucked. Barbados wouldn't even exist without Britain.
Yeah, to be fair though, I actually think that's just a small, kind of the same problem here. Actually, that's a small percentage of, that's like the political class saying that.
Yeah.
Like it seems to be largely the case that if the monarchy goes and if a member of them, like Prince William or whatever, goes and has a walk around or whatever out there, they're still largely popular.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like Barbados is like, yeah, it was Barbados that got rid of that became a republic. Like that was. Like, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago they have a referendum, and it was overwhelmingly in support of remaining a dominion.
Yeah, and they didn't hold a referendum this time; they just did it.
Yeah, because the rulers want to be able to pretend British bad.
Well, the rulers want to be able to blame the British for everything, and they're probably gonna use this as a bit of political theater to distract the people from the rather shite job they're doing.
My deal would be the next time there is a hurricane in the Caribbean and it fucks up Barbados, the British guardship there shouldn't go anywhere near Barbados and should let them get on with it.
Here.
That's the way I look at it. But you see, that's what you would do if you were a sensible government looking for your own people.
Well, if governments were sensible and looked out for their people, we probably wouldn't be here having this conversation, would we?
Yeah, that's true. That's true enough. Yeah, probably wouldn't. But yeah, I don't know, man. Rupert August, you haven't said much. Did you have something you wanted to bring up as a main topic?
Nothing particularly contemporary. The main thing that I've been reading about at the moment has been the Arthurian legend, actually.
Go for it, mate. Tell us what you've been reading.
Well, I mean, the relevance to our somewhat present situation and the power of the myth of the Arthurian restoration in shaping historical English events has been quite interesting. So, in particular, Edward III used it as a point from which to build his sort of ethnogenesis of the English, because that was kind of like the best binding point that he could find to sort of engender popularity and call back to something more significant. But then Henry VII also used it by when he was landing to lodge his claim for the throne. He stopped off in Wales to collect the banner of Arthur to fight under that, and that's incidentally why he named his firstborn son Arthur as well, because he was trying to tie himself to this legacy of the Arthurian restoration, and frame either himself or his son or his dynasty in general as the return of King Arthur from Avalon.
Yeah, I mean, there is a big importance of myth when it comes to politics and political history that a lot of people now just completely overlook.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of what I'm looking at, because there's a lot that's relevant to the kind of things that we want to see that I think comes out of the Arthurian legend. Like, I mean, obviously we would feel a lot more conflicted about the idea of fighting off the Anglo-Saxons, but conceptually the idea of subduing and perhaps even expelling the invaders in a time of strife is something that we could probably all get behind in principle.
Yeah, indeed.
And,
I mean, one of the things you'll see a lot. Yeah, go on, Rupert. Sorry,
I was just going to say, and the idea of collecting up all of the best men that you can find as well, and putting them in their proper place and giving them avenues to be useful is also something that's quite important, but not necessarily letting them have completely free reign. So, in the sense of the the Knights of the Round Table, and how none of them were quite perfect exactly, but they were all very competent at what they were tasked with doing.
Almost like England in the 100 Years' War in some respects.
Say again, sorry.
Almost like England in the 100 Years' War in some
Yeah.
respects.
Yeah,
I mean-
well, that's specifically what Edward was trying to do. He was trying to build back the same legacy, or build up the same kind of callback to the legacy of King Arthur, who was also incidentally invading Gaul. So
it's almost like, you know, you get some people who talk about these days feudalism, for example. Feudalism was always very surface in the UK. Like, there was no feudalism until William the Bastard won at Hastings.
Yeah.
And by the time of the 1350s, the Black Death had killed it dead. So feudalism was never very deep in England because it wasn't an Anglo-Saxon thing at all. And the Normans imposed it, but it didn't go very deep. So by the 1350s, or 1350s, 1360s, feudalism was kind of dead in England. And that's why you got the 100 Years' War, where the English armies were professional fighting soldiers, whereas the French were still relying on like levy and mass and all this kind of bullshit.
I disagree with that, mainly because England's army was professional not because of feudalism dying. It was professional because of England's tax structure and the nature and scutage. You could opt out of scutage and instead serve in the army.
Yeah,
that.
I'm not sure you're right about that, to be honest. Like, England's army was professional because you weren't a serf. Like, England got rid of serfs in the 1350s. They were never a big deal in England, as I tried to explain earlier.
Well, serfdom was never really a thing in it.
No, it wasn't.
No, it was.
That's what I'm trying to say. Like,
we had different names. We had different names for everything, but it was definitely still extant. And you can just check the Doomsday Book to see.
Yeah, yeah, okay, but that's the Normans wrote the Doomsday Book, all right. But
well, yes, but they didn't.
What I'm trying to say here, Rupert, is that it wasn't a big deal in England under the Saxons because the Saxons didn't really have a feudal system. And when William the Bastard, after he won at his battle in 1066, he tried to impose it, but he never went very deep. And within 200 years or so, it was dead anyway because of the Black Death. So of all the countries in Europe, Britain was the least feudal. That's why, for example, we know of at least 2 English archers who became sirs. And there may have been more, but we know of at least 2 who did, just because they were really good at their job and really professional. And we also know, if we look at the archaeology and a lot of the other stuff, that many English archers by 1415, in the Agincourt campaign, were almost as well equipped as many men at arms.
I think you're overemphasizing the perhaps cultural and ideological component of this, whereas, to my understanding, it's more of a wealth thing. So,
don't think so.
The situation was more the case that if you could afford to have your own land, then you weren't a serf because you didn't need to enter in some kind of relationship to get hold of that land to be able to feed yourself. So the fact that England was rid of serfdom earlier, as it were, it has a lot more to do with the fact that they were just generally a bit richer than a lot of these places in the way that the wealth was kind of like distributed.
That may have been true, but the whole social system was different. Like after about, I don't know, 1365, there were no serfs in England.
Not many, but yeah, certainly.
I mean, almost none.
I think the last ones were finally released under by legal bill under Elizabeth. I want to say Elizabeth I.
That would sound about right. But even by about 1365, there were almost none left. Whereas in Europe, they were like basically most peasants were still serfs. And the major reason for that change was the Black Death, which made labour in the UK so short. You know, those people in favour of constant mass immigration might also want to look at this, because like what really made ordinary English folk much more independent and able to go and do different stuff was the fact that there wasn't enough labour in the country. Whereas, you know, we're trying to do the opposite of that these days.
Yeah. I think there's potentially also a component, because this especially comes in during the 100 Years' War, where the strength of the king versus the nobles was much more skewed than elsewhere. And the king tended to be much more of a patron of the lower orders to weaponize essentially against the aristocracy. Whereas in France and elsewhere, the aristocracy was still more powerful. And it wasn't until after the 100 Years' War where the French had lost such a large percentage of their aristocracy, and a lot of those properties had come into.
Yeah, the English killed most of them, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they died in battle one way or another, or were killed, or they died basically as a result of the 100 Years' War. A lot of different lines, and their properties ended up coming into the possession of the crown, and so they were able to. The crown had the money to centralize on a lot of that basis, whereas the English had already, whereas the English had already sort of undergone this process before the 100 Years' War, and that's kind of how we were able to.
I don't think we did. You know, I think it was slightly different. I think, like I said, feudalism was alien to England. It came in with William the Bastard, but within 200 or so years, the Black Death had pushed it out again, and like Englishmen never accepted it really. English and Welshmen, I might add. Never accepted it really, and I think that was one of the fonts of English exceptionalism, to be truthful. I mean, this is why we know of at least two English archers who went from an ordinary archer to Sir somebody or other, and we just know about those two. There are probably more. And we know of many others who went from an archer to a man-at-arms, which was a promotion in the medieval military. So yeah, I just think it never sat easily in England, feudalism. And those guys I see on the right today, and I see them all the time, saying how wonderful feudalism is, and they're off. They're making a mistake. They're making a mistake.
Duke, I gotta head out. I'd like to thank you for having me on.
You are most welcome, mate. You can come on. You can come on again any time, but get your microphone working properly.
I will. I'll see you later, sir. Bye.
Go well.
See ya.
But yeah, I just think those people on the right who think feudalism was great, you know, can't move at all. You're absolutely stratified as to where you can be. That was never true in England. It was never true in England. Like you might not yourself be able to go upper class, but your son could, or your grandson could. And I think that is the root of English exceptionalism in many respects.
I think you've got a bit of a romantic image of the Anglo-Saxons. I mean, I would say that you could just go.
Well, I absolutely do have an absolutely romantic image of the Anglo-Saxons.
Overly so, I mean, because
no, I don't agree with that, but I do have a realistically romantic image of them because they're the best people in the entire world.
Okay. I don't think that much changed between 1066 and 1086 when the Doomsday Book was written.
No, I don't think anything changed in that short period either, Rupert. I totally agree with you. Nothing changed.
And about 10% of the population listed in the Doomsday Book were slaves.
Totally agree. No argument. I'm not talking about the Doomsday Book. I'm talking about the 1360s, 1370s. That's when things really did change in England.
Well, I would say it's probably more gradual than that. Just a process of everybody getting a bit richer.
Maybe, but also like by that stage, the Black Death had done its stuff, and like I don't know, somewhere between a third and a half of the English peasants were dead anyway. And all of a sudden, your labour was worth a lot more.
Yeah, but I mean, my point being more so that this is something that came out of circumstance as much as anything else, really. And so England experienced what we might call feudalism much the same as everybody else did, but we got richer faster, and so it was no longer appropriate much earlier than elsewhere. That would be my take.
I take your point, but like my point is, it was always feudalism was never very heavy in England. Like it never really was the system. It was imposed by the Normans, and we all know that the Normans were a relatively few people trying to impose something on a much bigger number of people, and it never really worked, which is why the Normans in the end were like kind of absorbed into the Anglo-Saxons.
Well, it helps that they lost a chunk of their original power in the White Ship disaster, followed by the Anarchy. But yeah.
So look, I think you and I, if we talked it out, would largely agree. But I just think that one of the things you got to look at when you look at Britain, and one of the things that some people on the right now slag off the eternal Anglos for, is the fact that feudalism wasn't a big deal in Britain relative to most of Europe. Yes, it existed. It existed for, I don't know, 200, 250 years maybe. But in Europe, it existed for like 500 years or more.
I've got a feeling the main point of disagreement here is sort of what we're defining as feudalism. So unless you want to get into the weeds on this, we could probably quite happily move on for now.
Yeah, all right. I mean, I suppose at some stage we could get into the weeds on it. But it's just that, the English armies in the 100 Years' War were not feudal levies. They were professional armies. They were paid. There were things you had to have to join the King's army at that stage in England.
Yeah, but the King also...
And all Wales, by the way. There were many Welsh soldiers in the English army.
But the King did also have the power to mandate a certain amount of military training to all males. So that's
listen, the deal was that all British blokes were supposed to practice archery every Sunday. And that was the thing for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years.
But to my knowledge, that kind of power held by a French king, it was sort of unthinkable for a while.
Yeah, but a French king wasn't powerful enough to do that.
Exactly. So the English kings were able to exert more central authority than their French counterparts, which.
But that didn't make you a serf. Like if you were a smallholder, for example, and you had to practice archery every Sunday because the king said you did in England, which was the case, as I said, for many hundreds of years. That didn't make you a serf. That was just what you could do on a Sunday.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, the one of the One of the dynamics of domestic politics at this time was that the noble lords would more frequently want you in serfs than the king would, because the king would rather have you be free and use you as a weapon essentially against the regional nobility. So the fact that the king was more powerful and the fact that there were fewer serfs, I don't think these two things are separate from one another. I think they're somewhat interconnected.
Yeah, but in England, when the English king was a reasonable guy, you couldn't be made a serf by English lords.
I think you could agree to it if you needed.
I'm sure you could agree to it, but most people wouldn't, of course, despite what AA seems to think. Yeah.
Well, it depends how starving you are. Because if the option is that or become a vagabond, then I'm sure a lot of people would sign up for that.
I'm sure some would, but most wouldn't. I don't know. You just look at the English armies that went to France in the war. They were mostly free-born Englishmen, or Welshmen. They were not serfs. The reason this whole thing comes about, where people say free-born Englishmen, is because way before vast majority of Europe, England had got rid of that serfdom nonsense. We just did. We ditched it because it never sat heavily in England anyway, because it wasn't Anglo-Saxon.
Yeah, I think we should probably talk about something else. If anybody else has got anything to bring up, any topics of interest?
Nah.
All right. Well, anyway, that's my own view. Is that the English armies that went to the 100 Years' War, and what England won most of the time in the 100 Years' War was because they were free-born Englishmen and professional armies, whereas the French were still using peasant levies all over the place, who lost all the time.
To my knowledge, they were mostly using mercenaries, but I'd have to research.
No, that's not true. They used plenty of mercenaries for sure, and they used large numbers of the French nobility who were completely ill-disciplined idiots. But yeah, no, the vast bulk of their armies were levies, basically. Like, you, and you come with us. And Britain didn't do that. To even join Henry V's army in 1415 as an archer, you had to have obviously your bow, and he would give you arrows, but you had to have your bow, which you would be tested to be able to fire. But you also had to shoot, I should say. You also had to have at least a buckler, which is a small shield. You also had to have at least a dagger, and you also had to have at least some sort of side sword. And a great many English archers had more armor than that, which is why, Agincourt, for example, after they had fired all their arrows, they were able to fall upon the flanks and rear of the French men-at-arms and knights and kill the bastards dead. Because they were quite well equipped. They were very professional soldiers. And to fire to shoot 160, 140 pound longbow, you had to be a very powerful man. You wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley on a dark night. And that's the truth. But these were free-born Englishmen. They weren't serfs. Whereas a lot of the French peasants, who they chased off very early in the battle, were actually serfs.
I mean, to me, that just sounds like another wealth thing, though, because, regardless of whether or not you're a serf, you probably want armor. If you can afford it, you don't want to die.
It's not a wealth thing, mate. It's not. It's a belief in yourself. I was in the
but
army.
that equipment costs a fair bit, though.
Yeah, of course it does. But look, I was in the army, and like this belief that I can fight as well as any other man isn't a wealth thing. That's a belief thing. Do you see what I mean? I don't know if you do. It might be difficult for people to get, but it is actually a truth.
I get the belief thing. But you can't have that alone.
No, it's not just that. Of course not. But it's also skill. It's years and years of training. But it is at bottom. It's a belief thing. Like the French serfs, like they would see guys in armor and on horses and would just run away because they were serfs. That's what they did. They just ran away. Like no English archers ever did that. An English archer was a soldier and a warrior. He never did that. He would look at those guys and think, "Well, let's kill you," you know.
It's kind of sounding like Whig propaganda quite rapidly.
No. It was a professional soldier way of looking at things. It really was. It really was. It was a professional soldier way of looking at things, and I don't know how to explain it to a civilian really. Like imagine you're a U.S. Marine or a British Royal Marine Commando guy or parachute regiment guy, and you're looking like a load of ordinary, I don't know, Ukrainian soldiers walking towards you, and you think, well, we're going to kill all these guys pretty easy, aren't we? It was that. It was that. If you can get what I'm talking about.
I'm pretty sure I understand what you
mean. Even look at myths like Robin Hood, for example. Look at a myth like Robin Hood and the archers of Robin Hood. It was that kind of thing. These guys were not cowed or second rate or didn't think all these other guys were above them at all. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. I don't know if I'm probably explaining it badly, but that's kind of what I mean. It was a bit like, you know, the British Army in 1914 that could fire 15 shots a minute, and the Germans thought they had huge numbers of machine guns, when in fact they only had 2 per battalion, but they could shoot German regiments to shit, you know, just because that's what they could do, you know. It was a bit like that. But the idea that England was ever really a feudal country is a bit of a con job, because it wasn't. And you can argue that that's bad if you want. If you're a full-on feudal supporter, you can argue the fact that England was only feudal for at most about 250 years, and it never went very deep. You can argue that's crap.
I don't know. Russians talk about the same thing. Like Russians make exactly the same case with regards to
they do,
and the encirclement in like the 16th century.
Sure, they do. Sure, and unlike many Brits, I'm not anti-Russian.
That's fine. I just think it's a bit selective and being like perhaps too precise about what feudalism is, because it's a vague concept anyway that doesn't really apply in all circumstances. It's a form of contract law basically that bridges the gap between what wealthy landed regional aristocrats have and what peasants or not even peasants, but you know, like what poor people, basically the poorest, have. And they bridge a gap that allows for some trade of freedom and generational loyalty, as somebody said in the comments earlier.
I'm not sure I agree with that at all. I think that modern dissident right people look on feudalism as some wonderful thing, which is basically bullshit. But then a lot of people on the modern dissident right seem to believe loads of shit is wonderful when it wasn't. But you know,
Yeah, but it was also a long-running Whig and liberal talking point that we're better in Britain because we're more liberal and we're more free, and all our people have like more liberties and more rights. Therefore, we're better than everybody else.
We're not more liberal, but we were more free, and people did have more rights. But that doesn't make them more liberal. If you are trying to tell me that an English retinue longbowman in, say, I don't know, 1390 was a liberal guy, I would call you a liar, because that's not true. He wasn't. There is a difference between being a semi-slave tied to the land who's not allowed to do anything or go anywhere, and being liberal. I think this is one of the problems that we have certainly in Britain, and to some degree in America, or the Americans always go back to the American War of Independence, which was really mostly about the French helping them, but you're not allowed to say that to Americans. But in Britain, what we do is we pretend, bad Anglos, because like ordinary freeborn Englishmen and Welshmen had, and eventually Scotsmen, of course, had more rights than people in Europe. I don't agree with that at all. It doesn't make you liberal, because all that Britain gave you was you weren't tied to the land. You could go anywhere you wanted, take any job you wanted, and if you were accused of a crime, you got a fair trial, more or less. That was all you were given, nothing else.
I think most of this is propaganda, to be honest. It's ringing very true of the bad historiography of the, when was it, the 18th century, or still the late 17th and 18th century, where we're trying to smear Louis XIV as like some kind of Oriental despot.
He was an arsehole. He was a total arsehole.
The rights and privileges of the people and the prerogatives of the king were basically unchanged between England and France at the time. It's like the only thing that was different was how people wrote about them.
Don't agree.
Okay.
I disagree on that one, Rupert. I'm sorry, I just do. Louis XIV was an absolute arsehole.
How?
Because he was the closest we came to Napoleon until Napoleon.
That's fine. Yeah. So the way that he used his prerogatives was objectionable, we might say, in trying to launch conquests and things. But what he had the power to do was basically unchanged. If anything, the kings in England had more power than Louis XIV did. It's just he used his power differently. Therefore, he's a tyrant.
Well, that's arguable. I would say that's arguable. But yeah, if you accept what you're saying, and I'm not saying it's not true, sure. But Louis XIV still wanted to take over most of Europe.
Yeah, and the Dutch.
Which was fine. I mean, then go for it. But he didn't manage it because eventually this chap called Marlborough came along and ruined him. Along with Eugene in the Holy Roman Empire, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I look. I'm not going to argue with you about that. I still think the freeborn Englishman has a certain amount of truth in it because, and I'll say it again, because I don't think enough people will get it, is it wasn't a deal in Britain until after William the Bastard and the Battle of Hastings, and it didn't stick.
Yeah, I don't agree. You can go and look up the categories of serfs in the Doomsday Book, and
you can, which was done just after 1066, when half of the English gentlemen, shall we say, the Anglo-Saxon gentlemen, had pissed off to Byzantium and turned the Hungarian Guard there from a Norse thing into an English thing.
I don't think half the population of England left to join the Varangian Guard.
No, I said half the gentlemen of England. Yeah. Did I not?
Yeah, but
which wouldn't have even been 10% of the English population.
I know. I'm over exaggerating, but I mean, I don't think there was that much change. I don't think they suddenly arrived and decided to enserf 90% of the population of England.
Yeah, they did. Yes, they did.
Okay.
They tried to. It didn't work. This is why, like, the central English myth is Robin Hood. It's the central English myth because that was the Anglo-Saxons saying to the Normans, "Nah, we're not going to do this, guys." If you ask me, anyway, I think that's why Robin Hood is the central English myth after William the Bastard won the Battle of Normandy. The Battle of Hastings. Is because that was it. It was the English Anglo-Saxons saying, "Yeah, we're not going to take this thing." That's why John is so desperately unpopular.
Anyway, I need to pop off because I've got a lot to do tomorrow.
Yeah, mate, I'm nearly done, mate. We got 3 minutes to go, and I'm going to finish.
Right. I'll hang on then.
I've been knackered, mate. I've been awake for 23 hours now, I think. So, Rupert, I'm not having a go at you, mate. I just don't agree with your take on that thing of history.
Yeah. I obviously don't agree with your take either.
That's fine.
All in good.
We can agree to disagree. That is perfectly fine. Guys, let me think. What do I want to plug here? I want to plug on the 3rd of June. I'm going to be doing a thing about the British Army in Europe, 1939, 1940, and 1944, 1945. And this is for mostly a member of my channel. So I'll be doing that. It'll be at the same time, 9 p.m. You can watch that. Okay, guys, anything to plug? Dave Bergeron, you got anything you want to plug?
No, thanks for inviting me on.
You're more than welcome, mate.
Yeah, thanks.
People are always welcome on this stream. Rupert, you got anything you want to plug?
Not in particular, just my my Twitter, I suppose, at Rupert August. I occasionally put in some historic threads or just threads about some interesting, obscure historical topics. Like recently, a little while ago, I suppose now, I was writing about Robert Filmer, and then a little bit before that, the Knights of the Faith, as a counter-revolutionary organization, like a secret society in the French Revolutionary period, who helped to restore the Bourbons.
Cool, man. Send it to me in my DMs, and I'll stick it in the description of this video. Adam, you got anything you want to plug?
Not yet. Hopefully soon.
No worries. All right, guys. As always, we are. I don't know. We were supposed to have Ryan Limbu this evening. I don't know what happened to him, but there we go. But as always, I will pass out the tune.
Forgetful, dreadful from each forest road. As well of blast, the blast that bears the skies, serves not to root thy native home. Muses still with freedom fall, shall to thy happy coast repair, shall to thy happy coast repair. Blessed I with matchless beauty crowned, and manly hearts to guard the fair.
Okay, that was obviously Britannia, one of the great songs of history. And I hope everyone will go well for the next week until we see you in 7 days' time, I guess. Thank you very much for all my guests for joining us. And we'll see you soon. Don't give up the fight, gents. This is the main thing I would say to people. We are living in really, really bad times. It's all clown world. But do not give up the fight, because if you do, your children and your children's children will be lost. So, yeah, don't give up the fight. Go on. See you soon.
Good night.